Did you know that plateaus are the highest form of flattery?
What's the best part of living in Switzerland?
I know this one.
Yeah, I don't know, but the flag is a big plus.
At a funeral, someone came up to me and asked if I would say a word. And I went up and said, plethora. I said, thank you. That means a lot.
You know, someone just asked me, can you stop singing Wonderwall? So I said maybe.
My wife would get mad at me a lot because I seem to always have candy. And I just told her, well, it's always because I have a few Twix up my sleeve.
What did Tennessee? Same thing as Arkansas.
I love to tell Dad jokes. Sometimes he laughs.
What do you call a potato with glasses?
What?
A spectator.
Jeez. You know, I'm not sure why Marvel doesn't use Hulk in their advertising more. He's basically just a big banner.
How do you get a country girl's attention? A tractor.
What's the difference between a well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a unicycle? A tire.
Okay. I got nothing.
And that got me. I think we both laughed at the same time on that.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that has better parenting than Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And for two guys who grew up in the 90s, we both, as great of our parents were, we both were kind of raised by TV dads, right?
A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're raised by our real dads, but they don't hold a candle to Uncle Phil. I stole yours. They don't hold a candle to some other guy.
I was gonna say, so Uncle Phil may show up on my list. I'm like, really? You're stealing my...
They don't... But they don't hold a candle to Cliff Huxtable.
Yeah, he's not on my list. Although the character was a good dad. We have to specify that now.
So let me start real quick with that. That's not on my list. We've got our top 5 TV dads. And Cliff is a good TV dad, but here's why I didn't put him on there, and it has nothing to do with Bill Cosby. Cliff Huxtable bullied his son quite frankly. Sure, he was a good breadwinner. He was there for his family. He was a family man. But, I mean, like, he'd make fun of Theo all the time. He'd make fun of his kids a bit. He'd kind of treat them like they were morons every now and then. And I'm like, that can't be in my top 5 if we got someone like that. But he gets a shout out because I knew someone else who is probably listening to this who's like, hey, you should talk about him if you're talking about TV dads. So here you go. We talked about him.
Yeah. This is a completely different subject, but The Cosby Show also was one of the earliest examples of, oh, we have a cute little kid in our show, but they're starting to get a little bit older. Let's get a newer, cuter kid. That's why, like, they have Raven show up in the show right when, like, Rudy was starting to hit puberty.
You know what show is really crappy with recasting a kid?
What was that?
Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Mike Ehrmantraut in that has a granddaughter named Kaylee, and in the Breaking Bad universe, she's like supposed to be like, what, 6 or 7 or something like that. And then we're watching Better Call Saul, and that's like 4 or 5 years before that. And then this version of Kaylee is like just as old. It's like they don't know how old Kaylee is in any of their shows, and like they have to keep recasting her or whatever because you can't have that character keep being like, oh, now I'm a 13-year-old 5 years before I was an 8-year-old.
Well, not in this kind of show.
She's a time traveler. That's what it is.
This isn't a time-traveling show.
Also, you know, when we were looking into, like, oh, who are best TV dads, just to make sure, like, I remembered some of the best ones, because I had a lot of good ones, and I'm like, are there any I'm missing? You know, you look online and see, hey, what are other people consider best TV dads? And the amount of lists that had either Homer Simpson or Walter White on it was terrible. I'm like, you guys are just trying to fill a number at this point. You're just naming TV dads.
Well, Homer Simpson had some. I mean, yes, he does strangle his son a lot, which isn't the best parenting. But I think
that's why. Like, anytime you have physical abuse on your resume, you don't get to be on a best of.
But it's a cartoon, which, I mean, definitely does change. I think underrated TV dad would be Bob's Burgers with Bob Belcher.
There you go.
But Homer does have some good moments like that when he realized that he has all the pictures of Maggie to motivate him to do work. Bart and Lisa don't motivate him at all.
No, exactly. No, I mean, he has good moments. He is definitely attentive to his kids when the plot demands, I guess. If it wants him to just be stupid and paying attention to the TV instead, is going to have him do that. But, like, you have 32 seasons. Of course he's going to have good moments in that of parenting. And then Walter White, the other one, like, well, his intentions were good when he was raising money for his family. Okay, fine. But then we hear in the final episode, he's like, no, I did it for myself. And it's like, no, you did it the wrong way. You're a bad dad. You made your kids grow up without you. And you could have easily, like, you could have fought this the right way, even though that would have been a blow to your pride.
I think prior to Breaking Bad, maybe he was a good dad.
Maybe.
Because we saw, he had his internal struggles and his insecurity about he thought his career was going to take off. But, we don't see a whole lot of him before he started to break bad.
Yeah. He was just this repressed, neutered man. And sure, early in, like, the first season, we see him maybe have too extreme of a reaction to some kids that are making fun of Flynn.
That's true, yeah.
He does stand up for his son in public, and, like, that's great to see him do that. But again, it's like two or three good moments or stuff that we don't see on screen. That doesn't put you on a best dad list.
No.
But these guys are. So, Brian, do you want to start, or do you want me to start with number 5?
I'll start with the number 5. Actually, you know what? Let me pull up my list.
All right, I'll start with it because he's pulling up his list.
Gotcha.
So I went old school. I know that there's one guy on my list that you would have had on your list, and this was one of the few times that I reached out and I'm like, hey, Brian, just so you know, this is on my list, so you don't have to include him. So you do know one person coming up. But he's not my number 5. My number 5 is one that I would be surprised if you had him on your list just because we don't think about him so much since it was a different era. And that was Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch.
No, I went through a stretch like back in high school when it was on Nick at Night when I watched Brady Bunch a lot. I haven't watched it a lot since then, but it's a good choice.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. What puts him in the top for me, because there is a little bit, like my wife, I told her that he was one I was thinking of, and she's like, well, in that era, all you had to do on screen to be a good dad was pretty much be there and be nice. I'm like, yeah, he was that, but what gives him that added benefit, the bonefit, as I was going to say, the added benefit was that he also gets to be a stepdad. He gets to be a really good dad to the girls as well as to his own boys. And for him and Carol to really manage that blended family as well as they do, that's what puts him in that top. He gets to be a disciplinarian when he needs to be without being mean. He gets to be kind to his kids. He gets to listen to his kids and actually hear their complaints and their concerns. And you don't really see too much favoritism because you would be able to in that sort of setting. You have 6 kids. It's easy to have a favorite. You have the jokes of, oh, it's Marsha, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't really see that from the parents' point of view. We see just Jan feeling insecure more than anything else.
Yeah, which is understandable. All kids feel like that.
Yeah.
I mean, at different points, me and my sister both thought that each other was the favorite kid.
Of course, if there's any like kids out there that you are like siblings, you tend to have that. You're like, well, you're the favorite because of this. Well, you're the favorite because of this. And then you complain to your parents like, you let them get away with everything. And anyone who has ever said that to your parents and you're not a parent yet, just know they're laughing internally. They might actually laugh externally, but they're laughing internally because there's no way that we do that.
Yeah. I'm sure with your kids, you probably just said whoever ends up being richest is your favorite.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes.
I've let them know that ahead of time, that
Yes.
I will like them the most.
And so kind of the successor of the Brady Bunch was, I know you've only seen like the one episode, was Step by Step was kind of that successor where it was the same. In the 90s, it was each of the parents had 3 kids. They got married, and it was it dealt more with the step family kind of stuff.
Sure.
And that was kind of similar there. I don't know if in either they barely ever touched it. Fleeting references in Step by Step. Do they ever mention like the other parents in Brady Bunch, like the dad's original wife and the all that?
Not that I know of. I know that they did with the movies, but the movies weren't really canon. They were more like almost satire of Brady Bunch.
Which I think in both of those shows, we both went on for a long time. It's kind of a missed opportunity because that storyline there. Like, did they die? Did they divorce? Are the parents involved at all? Like, there's so many different variables to having a blended family, and exploring that would have been, I think, a better choice. But yeah, I do think that he was a good dad.
Yeah. And if any Brady Bunch fans out there are like, yeah, they totally did that, obviously, like, let us know. We're not complete Brady Bunch fans. I watched it a bunch on TV Land. I've probably seen most episodes, but, I mean, there's not a lot that I'm like, oh, I definitely have this remembered. I definitely have a much better history of knowledge for, like, The Office and New Girl and etc.
Also, for a show that's like 50 years old, I'd be surprised if we have Brady Bunch enthusiasts listening.
Me
Not
too.
That it's a terrible show.
But you never know.
All right.
I mean, I had a roommate who was my age in college, and his show was MASH. MASH was about 10 years... No, that was the early 80s, wasn't it? That was like 20 years later after that. But still, like, for someone who didn't grow up with MASH on, for him to be as big of a fan as he was... Yeah, it's
well, actually, our friend and podcast guest Mike, who's also our age, is probably the biggest MASH fan I've ever known.
Yeah, so there you go. But MASH is great. MASH is a way different show than Brady Bunch is.
Okay, so my number 5 is the only one that I know you don't have it on this list because I know you've only seen. Actually, I don't think you've ever seen the show. It's Bobby from Supernatural.
Okay, I haven't.
Okay, so. And this is interesting because he's not technically a dad. And this is why I want to put him on this list, because in Supernatural, just real quick premise is Sam and Dean are the brothers, and the whole thing was that their mom was killed by a demon when they were little, and their dad raised them with this vendetta to like grow up and kill this specific demon. And they were basically raised from like little kids to basically be supernatural killing machines.
That was almost the plot of Brady Bunch. They had two different ideas, and they went with what they ended up with. So.
I think that, it was better to save it a couple years for Supernatural.
Just a couple, yeah.
And so, I mean, the dad loves his sons, and the dad is in the show. I mean, the dad dies, I think, at the end of season 1, or season 2. Early on, the dad dies. Spoiler alert, but the show's been a long time. But then there's Bobby, who was a good friend of the dad's, and he kind of ends up being like the surrogate father and like the resource for the kids. Well, the kids are adults, but... And they really look up to him as a father figure, and he cares about them as sons. And it's such an emotional moment when Bobby dies in, I think, season like 8 or 9 or so. And in that moment, he has a little bit similar to like Rebecca on This Is Us, where she had like the train memories where he's dying, except it's a lot more violent and emotional, and he has to like confront his dad from his past, who was like an abusive dad, and he tells him like... he sees a flashback of his dad telling him like, you will never amount to anything, you're worth crap. And he's like, you know what, I ended up adopting 2 boys and they grew up heroes. And just the fact that he not only was like right with these guys supernaturally, because he's another supernatural monster killer, but also they show in a flashback, there's a scene where the dad is like, why did you take my son to play baseball? You were supposed to be teaching him shotgun lessons today. And it's like, well, I thought he's 10 years old, he could be a kid for a day.
I don't let my kid play baseball. He only does shotgun lessons. He's 10.
Okay, sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm a great dad.
But it just goes to show that like they never called him dad, but he basically was their dad, and I thought he definitely deserved to be on this list.
That's great. Like, I love that. I think that sort of role is undervalued, and it's becoming more valued in the last couple of years. But for a long time, there are a lot of men out there who they have biological kids of their own, but then there are a lot that they don't have any biological kids of their own, and then they end up adopting. And I'm sitting right next to someone who is in that camp. So, I'm not brown. By the way, we're next to each other this time. We usually do this over Zoom. We happen to be in the same location, so No, I'm not just brown-nosing to you because I'm right here with you or because I'm talking to you, but like I do think that that's so needed to have men who will step in, and whether they actually formally adopt, or they get to be a stand-in. And I got a father on my list who gets to be a fatherly stand-in without ever assuming that title himself. That is super important. Like, kids need both positive male role models and positive female role models. And if you look at statistics of like successful people, you find people that have both of those in their life, and especially that fatherly role, that without that role you're in at a higher increase to go to jail or be in poverty or fight demons, so
Especially that last one.
Especially that one.
Although with those guys, they had the fatherly role, they didn't have the motherly influence because she was killed by a demon.
Freaking demons.
It's a really intense show. And that show, I do say, again, in a more spoilers, once they actually do kill that demon in like season 3 or 4 or something like that, it's almost like, well, now what? Then there's kind of like, oh, there's a new big bad. They beat that. Oh, now there's a new big bad, and they beat that. It just kind of they do that for like the rest of the show.
Of course. I mean, that makes sense. That's what they have to do. All right, my number 4 is from a show I know that you've heard of, or that you've watched. I don't think you have it on your list, but I know that you've seen it. Hopefully a lot of our viewers have seen it, that if you grew up in the 90s, there's a lot of these type of shows, and there's a lot of different audiences. But I was a big fan, and I think I only got into it in syndication because of Disney Channel, but I was a big fan of Smart Guy. And so Floyd Henderson from Smart Guy, fantastic father.
Yes.
And this is another one that, like, Mike and Carol, they had the step parent sort of thing going on. We've got Floyd as a single father, and
he was widowed, right?
He was widowed, yeah.
Yes.
And so his wife died. I don't remember when she died, but his wife died, leaving him with 3 kids. That's hard enough. And then his son is showing this high aptitude, and like, for the dad to know how to help support him, to get him in the spot that he needs to be in, but then to create like a sticky situation with TJ's brother being in that same grade, and be like, well, I don't want it to seem like I'm favoring TJ and that he's the golden boy because I still love you, and like to navigate that, and then also have a daughter. It's hard as a father to be a father of a daughter, especially a teenage daughter, and then to not have the mom there to help you out with anything that girls need at that age. Like, he had the chips stacked against him. Plus, he was a contractor, so he was in charge of his own business, and so he had that hustle going. So he had a lot of work he had to do, and yet you see him constantly giving great parenting advice.
Yeah.
He is constantly he doesn't talk down to any of his kids. He's one that I mocked Cliff Huxtable earlier, that he makes fun of his kids. Floyd sometimes makes fun of his older son because it's a sitcom, and so I know I should take points off there, but I just really love some of the conversations he has with his kids, and how he's not afraid to own up to his mistakes. I remember there's one episode when he wanted to surprise his daughter because she went away for something. It's like, she hasn't had her own room, and or has her own bathroom, and she needs to have her own bathroom because you can't share a bathroom with 3 other guys as a teenage girl. And so he builds a bathroom for her while she's away, and then she comes back and she has to say, oh, I'm grateful for it, but she wanted to be a part of that decision, and she wanted to make some of these choices, and so he realizes that he messed up in that, even though all of his intentions were great. Yeah. And so he was able to course correct, and I want you to be involved in this, I want this space to be yours, and to do this the right way, and owned up to it, even though in a way he didn't really do anything wrong. He just did things the best way he knew possible, and it wasn't what was best for her.
Yeah, I watched Smart Guy. I watched all of it, and it's been a few years, so I don't have any specific moments that popped out. It's one of the shows you forget about, and I didn't know you watched this show.
I do. I liked it a lot.
It's just funny, last night we were hanging out, and I didn't know that Matt knew these shows, so I was talking about back when Disney Channel did the Disney Channel Circle of Stars. We had all the different stars at the time of the Disney Channel shows, and I said, Hilary Duff, Kristen Carlson Romano, and the kid from Smart Guy, thinking he's not going to know who Taj Mowry is. But Matt's like, excuse me, you mean Taj Mowry?
He's like, all right, my bad.
I mean, you could also call him the kid from Kim Possible or Full House, too.
Yes. I never watched Full House, but I did hear later that he was on that. Or you could call him Tia and Tamara's brother.
Tamara, yeah.
Tamara. I know, like, a bunch of Tamaras, and all of them, like, there's, like, 3 or 4 of them I know, and some of them are Tamara, and some of them are Tamara, and I don't ever know which ones are which, and I always get it wrong. And so that's why I don't talk to them.
Also, Matt, unless you have one, I have Taj Mowry-related trivia we can do at the end.
Okay, I'm up for it.
Cool. All right, so I'm going with my pick.
Number 4.
Number 4. This is a dad that was all over the 90s. You think of a 90s TV dads, you have to think of Tim the Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement. Mm-hmm. Who is a good mix of, like, the bumbling, oafish dad. It's like, oh, the wife's in charge and he's, and all that kind of stuff. But he's not, like, an absentee dad. He's not like Peter from Family Guy where he doesn't really care about his kids. He does love his kids. He loves his wife and all this stuff. He's just is not very practically smart.
Yeah, and there's a difference between what he is and being stupid. And there's a lot of shows that will make the dad stupid in the version of, like, you should disrespect him. And, like, that's something that I really don't like that I see in a lot of shows. And it was really big in, like, early 2000s.
Yes.
That's like, oh, just the dad's stupid and he's bumbling. And it's like, Tim's not so much stupid. He's just the stereotypes of manliness at an exaggerated level. Mm-hmm. And so there is, like, he might have emotional intelligence in terms of, like, he doesn't respond poorly and he, like, doesn't fly off the handle in anger to a point that he, like, is in the wrong about it or stuff like that. He handles his own emotions well, but he doesn't really know how to connect to other people's emotions super well. And that's just really where he finds his flaws. But that's not like so much a bad thing, because you're right. He is a great dad.
Mm-hmm. I think part of that, it seemed like kind of a side character, but Wilson, the neighbor, is the one who kind of really reined him in, because a lot of times Wilson was the one who would talk him down and give the new perspective and allow him to interact with his family in a new way after talking with, Wilson as, like, the wise sage.
Yeah. And Wilson would speak a language that Tim would understand, even though, like, Wilson would use these metaphors that Tim didn't understand, and then he'd explain the metaphor, and then Tim would be like, oh, I get it. And then it would always be funny, because Tim would try and use that metaphor again, but he didn't do it the right way, so he'd just say out of context some sort of example, and it would always be funny to hear how he interpreted it, like what Wilson said. But he ended up arriving at the right conclusions a lot of times.
Yeah. I think one of the best examples with Tim is how he was supportive of Randy when Randy had the cancer scare. Because at one point, Randy thought that he might have cancer, and it ended up being negative. But during that time, they're like at an arcade, kind of like breaking down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like how you saw a lot of times where he was a good disciplinarian and good where he, like, set boundaries and limits for the kids without being a mean one, and also without being, like, against what Jill would, because Jill was also a good disciplinarian as well. You had both of them doing a really good job of setting those limits for their kids, but you didn't see too much of, like, sometimes parents in a nuclear family, you'll see this where, like, one will set a boundary, then one will be a little looser on it, that they were good about supporting each other and of having a united front. And that's really important for parents, is to have a good relationship with the other parent as well. Definitely. For your kids.
And this was kind of continued with Tim Allen as Mike Baxter in Last Man Standing, which is almost kind of like the same. He's not the exact same character as Tim Taylor, but the characters share a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. You might say, like, that speaks to Tim Allen's capabilities as an actor, but he does, I think that's more his capabilities as a producer or showrunner or whatever role he is.
Although there was an episode, did you see this one where he did the double duty? He had himself come and visit as Tim Taylor from Michigan, and he's doing work at Mike Baxter's house, and those two are having a conversation with each other, like, you look like me, just more gray, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it was silly, goofy humor, but it's kind of cool to see him play his iconic character 20 years later with his new character.
Yeah, I saw that advertised. I never ended up watching that show, or watched that episode. I have seen the show. I've seen a good amount of seasons of it.
All right. Are you on number 3 now?
I'm on my number 3, one that I guarantee that you have. I don't even know if you've watched it, but this I love this pick because it's out of left field. It's like when we talked about who would you like as a best friend, and I was like, oh, Blue from Blue's Clues. Mm-hmm. So this pick is from another kids show, but it's actually a really good kids show. It's one that like parents like. They're not going to sit down and be like, I'm going to turn this on when my kids aren't around. But if it's on with their kids, they kind of are interested, and I speak that from personal experience. The show is called Bluey, and so the dad from Bluey's name's Bandit. He is a great dad. He plays with his kids, and he like lets his kids in their playing. Like he lets the kids decide it. So it's kind of like, you know, when you play with kids, it's almost like you're doing an improv performance, and it's like, what world are we inhabiting? What are we doing with this imagination? And the dad is really good at like letting the kids choose these things, and then he goes along with it. Now, of course, it's a kids show, and it's an animated show, and it's not just for kids, it's for also little kids. So, of course, everything's going to be picture perfect and an exaggerated view of, there's no conflict, and the conflict that there is very minor, and then whatever conflict happens, you can talk them out of it within a minute or a minute and a half. But he still is such a good dad of how much he engages with his kids at the age that they are, how much he engages with his wife, how much he cares for everyone in that family, and just even how he is his own unique personality and how he's fun and he's silly and he makes his kids laugh. And it's just like, you know, it's a very idealized version of the type of dad I like to be. Love to play with my kids, love to make my kids laugh, love for all of us just to have fun times together. And so when I thought of him, I'm like, I have to give him a shout out. He's a great character.
I can't say I've ever seen Blue. I've heard of the title. I've never seen it, so I can't really specify it. But I'll believe what you say.
If you are a parent and you've got small kids, if you've got any kids under the age of 10, they'll like this show. It's really well done. It's better than a lot of kids shows out there. And so if you're a parent and you have a kid under 10, you probably already know about this show anyway.
My number 3 is kind of in today's culture, like probably one of the most talked about dads. I'm going to go with Jack Pearson from This Is Us.
Good pick.
Obviously, you could talk about any of the dads on This Is Us, but they focus more on Jack. We've talked about it. Jack's not perfect. He had his, alcoholism. He had his lying to his family their whole lives about their uncle being dead. But aside from that,
aside from those big red flags,
is he truly cared about his family? And I like that his backstory growing up. You see that he was elevated as a dad because he didn't want to turn into his dad.
Yeah.
Because his dad was an alcoholic abuser who said terrible things to his kids and his wife. And, like, you can see there's an episode where Rebecca goes to visit Jack's dad on his deathbed, and just, like, that look of regret on his face on how he lived his life. And it's the opposite with Jack, where, I mean, Jack didn't even get to grow old, but, like, he made the most of the time he had with his family, which is what the whole finale flashback scene is all about. Him just taking in that moment of the kids. And realizing that all of his kids are different and they all need something different. Like, Kate kind of needed to be coddled, whereas, Kevin needed to be pushed and kind of like make a harder hand. And then Randall just kind of needed to be helped as he kind of just propelled himself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So this is one that I knew you were going to have on your list, and so that's why I didn't put him on my list. But he would be on my top 5, so that's why I had you let you have that. Yeah. But Jack, like we talked, you said about his alcoholism. I just wanted to bring up real quick too is that like there's his alcoholism. Sure, alcoholism does affect everyone in the family, but he did it in a way that like he was a depressed drunk more than he was like angry and abusive, and it was nipped in the bud early. Like props to Rebecca for being like, I'm gonna help you through this, but you are gonna get through it. And so he was able to kick it, and that's great, and props to him. But then also thank God that he didn't allow that to hurt his family more than it did. And so, that's why he still gets to be on this list is, he had his problems and he shook them, but he overall was really good. And hopefully, I said this when we talked about the This Is Us episode that, there could be an unreliable narrator aspect to him where maybe he wasn't really as good as we see in these flashbacks, but that it's just the way that they all remember him, because you think more fondly on people once they've died.
Well, I don't think that's the case, because I think even the flashbacks were an outside observer, whereas like you can really make the case for How I Met Your Mother because it's literally being told from Ted's point of view. Yep. But it's not the people telling this is my version of the story. We're seeing it outside of one person's point of view.
True.
And another thing, I noticed is, Jack, on the day he died, he went back in the house, not just for Kate's dog, but he came in with like a pillowcase full of family mementos that he went and saved. And including, I realized this when I was rewatching it, because this was the 90s. There wasn't like, hard drives in the cloud and everything. One of the things he grabbed was the family photo album. Yeah. This is could have been a plot hole, because we've seen in the present day all the Pearson family, they have pictures around their house of the kids when they were younger and stuff. That might not have even been possible, because if all of their photos were physical photos in this photo album, then there would be no photos to make copies of later to have with their adults. Yeah. So like they literally have those pictures as adults because Jack went into the fire.
He did it. He saved the memories. Yeah. Oh man, Jack, what a good, really, really well written dad. I mean, you could also make the case for Randall being on this list. You could even make the case for William being on this list just his final little bit, because it wasn't William's fault. We see a lot of William's story, especially the first season. It wasn't so much William's fault, even though all he had to do was just like really fight for it. But like you can understand the choices he made early on, and especially when Rebecca comes up and like, you can't see him, you can't see your son. But when his son finally reaches out to him, he is like, I've been waiting for this. I want to be that dad. I want to be there for you and hear how your life has been and be a granddad. Yeah. So.
And, also Toby and Kevin and Miguel and even Philip. They're all, could be good dads.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't see a whole lot with them and their parenting. Even Miguel, because Miguel comes into the picture for parenting when the kids are at an age they don't need parenting anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, Miguel also has his own son. And I like the fact that in the Miguel episode, they did bring back that episode. And I like that it was Kevin, because Kevin had the most animosity towards Miguel all along, and that Kevin was the one to reach out to Miguel's son and saying, you don't know how much time you have, you need to come and make amends.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So speaking of knowing what's on the other person's list, my number 2 is the one that that I was going to have on here. And I can't not talk about Alan Matthews from Boy Meets World. I was going to put him as my number 1 until I thought of my number 1. I'm like, no, that guy has to be on top. But Alan Matthews is a tremendous dad. So we've talked about a couple nuclear families, and this is one as well, that Alan with his wife, and now I'm blanking on his wife's name. Amy. That Alan and Amy, they are a great couple. I remember the one episode when they when the kids think that like the mom's having an affair or whatever, but they're actually like sneaking out to date each other. Yeah. Which is kind of a funny thing, but it's like you don't need to sneak to date your spouse and hide it from your kids. But they are great parents to Corey and
Eric
and then no one else in that family, because the show doesn't care about anyone else in that family.
Yeah, they don't really have. I think there's maybe like one scene where the dad talks to the daughter. Like she's not the focus of the show. Yeah. But he does have a lot of great Corey and Eric and Sean moments.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. We were going to have a guest on this show, and one thing he highlighted is like, I'm definitely going to talk about Alan Matthews, and I'm going to talk about how he was a father to Sean, and that is a huge, great point. Sean was never asking for Alan to be his dad, and Alan never said, I will be a surrogate father for you, but Alan was always there for Sean, didn't hold him at arm's length. There was like the one episode when Corey, after he broke up with Topanga, started drinking,
yep, and
then he blamed Sean for it, and then like he owned up to it. He's like, I am so sorry that I let that I put that on you, put the blame on you. But for any other scene, I don't think there was other times that like he looked down on Sean of like, you're not good enough to be my son's friend or anything like that. Sean was a part of the family, and anytime Sean needed that positivity from Alan, he was there for it without saying, I want to take the place of your dad or Mr. Turner, your guardian, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, even when you can't talk about Sean with Alan and Sean without that moment when Sean was in a cult and he said to the cult guy, like, I will kill to protect Sean from guys like you because he's the best friend my kid ever had.
Yeah.
And then later on when Chet, Sean's actual dad, was in the hospital and Chet was saying, can you look after them, not when I die, but because when I get out of here, I'm going to go to Vegas and work there. And Alan's like, I will look after Sean, but I'm not the one he needs. Even then, he's like, I will step up, but he's trying to have Chet step up and be the dad that, I mean, of course, that's the episode that Chet died.
Yeah. Man, like, even you just saying that, it almost gets me emotional, because it's like, he is such a good example. He shows Sean and he shows Eric and Corey how to be a good man. Like, I remember when Corey later, when he marries Topanga and they're having trouble at the beginning and they come to him, is like, would you help him? It's like, no, you decided that you're old enough to get married, so you decide that you guys are going to figure out your problem here. And having to do that tough love, like, I remember as a kid watching that, I'm like, wow, he's kind of being a jerk there. And then, like, at the end of the episode, when Corey comes back because he was able to fix a sink or whatever, and he, like, rubs it in Alan's face, like, I was able to do this, and, like, then we realize that was the point. Alan knew that Corey needed to know he can do that he can be now the head of the household and be the husband and soon father that he wants to be.
And then on the Eric side of things, so my favorite Boy Meets World character is Eric, and especially in like the seasons 1 through 4, maybe 5 arc before they completely just said, oh, okay, Eric's the dumb one now. Eric and Alan had a lot of great moments because they were like kind of buddy-buddy, but he was also really the one who could really get to Eric. And even after Eric was like, we call Flanderization, where he just kind of get down to being two-dimensional at the end. It's one of the final episodes of the show, and they go back to the Wilderness Store, which they hadn't seen it in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where Eric and Alan are sitting down, and they're talking about his future. And Eric's like, well, you know what? It's safe. You know, my friends have all these big dreams. I'm just going to stay here and work with you. And Alan's like, well, what do you actually want to do? Remember when you used to want to be a weatherman and all this kind of stuff? And just kind of try to really talk to, like, not that I don't want you around here, but I want you to follow your own dreams, not limit yourself.
Yeah. And I remember another episode from when Corey was younger of a little different side of him that we also got to see him share, like, things with his kids. And so there was an episode when Alan was watching a baseball game and the pitcher was about to pitch a perfect no-hitter. And he's like, this is history. He went upstairs, woke up his son, and brought him downstairs and, like, you're going to watch this with me. This is history. And, like, wanted to share that part of him. Now, the next day at school, he was tired and he doesn't do well on his test. And Feeney doesn't let him retake the test. He's like, nope, that was the choice you made and that's consequences. It's almost framed like that was a bad action. But the intention of it was, like, this is important to me, and I want to share it with my kids.
Mm. And one last thing, so going forward to Girl Meets World, Eric was in Girl Meets World, but Eric didn't share any scenes with Amy and Alan, except for the very end. They had this big scene where they had to bring back all, like, the fast pass people in one group shot. But there's a Christmas episode where Amy and Alan and Sean all come to dinner. No Eric or Morgan. No even mention of, oh, Eric and Morgan can't come to visit because of whatever.
And they also had a baby at the end of Boy Meets World that no one really remembers either.
No, that baby comes back in Girl Meets World.
Really?
As well.
No way.
They remember, they cast a new kid, they come back. So Joshua, the baby Matthews, comes back and has like a flirty thing with Corey's niece, with Corey's daughter's best friend.
Okay.
Anyways, but in this family episode, of course, it's the first time you see Sean in Girl Meets World, and he has this big Corey reunion, and then they make a point to have Sean go and have a hug and embrace both Amy and Alan. Again, they didn't think to do that with Eric, but they did that with Sean.
Yeah. Well, Eric doesn't think at all, so.
Well, and also Will Friedle doesn't do a lot of in-person acting anymore. He came back to do Girl Meets World, but for the most part, he does a lot of voice acting now.
Yeah, he's probably better at voice acting than actual acting.
All right. So now my number 2.
Your number 2.
My number 2 is a dad who's a dad in a stranger kind of way.
Nice.
I'm going with Jim Hopper from Stranger Things.
Oh, not Ted? Or
yeah, that's his name. Yeah, Ted.
Yeah.
Who Didn't you make some comment about like throwing kids in jail this season?
Something like that.
No, not
Classic Ted.
Also, like, I think it's funny. Like, I was listening to a podcast today about Stranger Things. They said any adult who's not a main character is either an idiot and or evil on the show.
True. Yeah.
Yep. But Hopper, of course, you have the backstory of him losing his daughter to cancer in his past, which is like his demons that he has to deal with before he deals with the upside down demons.
Yeah.
Ha.
We all understood it. You didn't need to go there.
I like to accentuate my jokes with a ha.
Okay.
But then to add a button onto that, then he also becomes a father to 11 and really gets this connection with her, and that emotional moment at the end of season 3 when she's reading the letter, when he's having the talk that he never actually got to give her. It's maybe it might be a little bit ruined now, the fact that it's not going to probably be the last time they see each other.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think that they're gonna kill Hopper or 11, because I don't think they already did the separation of them. I don't think they're gonna do it again.
Yeah.
So I think they're gonna come back together, and they are two of 5 characters who I believe will for sure live through the rest of the season, through the series. I don't think Hopper or 11 will die.
This isn't spoilers, by the way, because this is unconfirmed. This is all Brian guessing.
This is speculation. There's those two. There's 3 other characters I think will live. Everyone else, I think, is fair game to die. But we're getting into Stranger Things category instead of Hopper as a dad category. So, Do you have any thoughts about Hopper as a dad?
I don't think he deserves to be number 2. This is my biggest disagree, because he's good with 11, in terms of intention, but he, all of season 3 was about how he doesn't know what to do with her. He doesn't know how to raise her, and he's trying his best. And he took her in, and he does do self-sacrificing type behavior to protect 11 and keep her safe, and that is a big deal. Agreed. So I wouldn't say he's bad. I just think that in terms of all the great stuff that we talked about and the great dads that we've had, I think he had such a small sample size. Because, again, he was probably a really good dad. We saw flashbacks of him and his original daughter, and, everything in that is really good. Shows the caring that he had for her. And speaking of that real quick, some of my favorite Stranger Things stuff is in the finale of season 1, where it's showing how he wasn't able to do anything to save his daughter, but he is able to do something to save Will and get a little bit of a redemption there. That's a really good juxtaposition and really good way to give his arc closure in that season.
Yeah. Well, maybe the reason he's on my number 2 is suddenly going from not having any kids to having a 12-year-old kid is something I can relate to, because that's what I did.
And again, it's not like he's bad. He's just, I don't think he's in number 2 conversation. That's all.
Fair enough. It's not a disagreement to end the podcast, though.
Well, I think it is. I think I have to go now. You guys don't get to hear the number 1. I'm so mad. Anything else that you wanted to say before I hit us number 1?
No.
All right. Well, we definitely spent the most time talking about Alan Matthews because we had so many examples to share about him. And I mean, you see the reason why he almost was number 1.
Yeah.
But I'm putting number 1, the dark horse, and almost literally dark horse of Gomez Addams. Gomez Addams is, you might not think of him in this category because the family is oddball, and that's kind of the whole point. But if you look at how he is with his family, he is everything that a dad should want to be. He is caring to his kids, and he's very supportive. He interacts with both Wednesday and Pugsley in the way that is best for them. He, is attentive to their needs. He cares so much about them, and also he's very empowering to his whole family of, I want you to be who you are, and he does it in just that goofball, smiley, laughy way. He has such a great demeanor and such good attitude, and is always cheerful, even though everything is so macabre around him, and he is super positive to them, but then also he sets such a good example for love to his kids and positive relationships with how he is with Morticia. And so, he has this passion for his wife that has not diminished with all of their years of marriage, and it's played for laughs, but it's also really adorable and really romantic. And then all of that as well, he also like shows how important family is by letting Fester and the grandma let them both live there as well, and then also even making Thing a part of the family, and like the good relationship with the other Adams, including cousin It. And so he like really emphasized family is so important, but also he, you know, because they're so weird, people have such negative reactions to them, but he never like, he doesn't even take it personally, and he like believes them for their best, and he shows that example to his kids of like, we still are fitting in with all these people, and we still can be Adams and distinctly Adams in the midst of all of this, and not hold it against them just because they aren't part of our family. They want to be like us.
And to those who might be saying this is weird, think about this. Gomez is nicer to guests than Danny Tanner ever was to Kimmy Gibbler.
Look at that. Look at that. That is so true. Like, Gomez is just an amazing human being that the only knock against him is that they are so weird and they're so, like, dark in terms of what they like.
Yeah, they're just unapologetically themselves.
Yes. And that's good. That's great.
All right, is that all you got for Gomez?
That's all I got.
So my number one was spoiled the very, very first thing you said, which is Uncle Phil.
If you want to edit around it, you might be able to do that.
No, I could, but you know what? They heard it. We said it. It's live. It's not live, but I'm leaving it in.
I know how much you like for me to give you more work, so I thought you'd want that.
No, so Uncle Phil was a dad. He had 3, then 4 kids himself, and he has good moments with Hillary and Ashley and Nikki and Carlton, but I'm going to focus more on him and Will, because the big scene, everyone knows the why doesn't he want me scene, but it's kind of a slow burn. Like at the very beginning, episode 1, he's not like, oh, come here, you're my son now. Like Will was the pain in the butt nephew who came in and disrupted their world. He was a little bit like Richard Gilmore from Gilmore Girls, where he had his family is very well to do, and they all knew like the high society way to do things. They have Jeffrey the butler, and Will comes in from Philadelphia. He's wearing his crazy clothes. He's not speaking like the dignified rich people speak, and he's having this influence on all these kids, especially. I don't know how much you've seen of Fresh Prince. Is it just that one episode?
Just the one you made me watch, yeah.
I think it's the pilot where Will is having this great influence on Ashley, who was like 11, 12 at the time, and they're having this like dinner with like distinguished guests. You can imagine it like a Gilmore dinner, and then she starts rapping in the prayer to give blessing for the food, and everyone's looking at like, what is happening to our family? But over time, he really treats Will like a son, not just in like the disciplinary stuff, but he starts to encourage him. And there's this scene later on where Will gets a job in secret as a waiter for this pirate restaurant. Which is that a thing, or is that just a thing in the 90s? Because Full House also did like a pirate themed restaurant episode.
I think The Office has a pirate-themed restaurant that they go to. I think that Boy Meets World has a pirate-themed restaurant that they've gone to.
So maybe it's a TV thing.
It's maybe a TV thing. I've never been to one, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that those exist.
Yeah. Uncle Phil had kind of been ragging on Will about being lazy and not taking initiative, and all the while Will has this job he didn't know in secret, and then Will is their waiter. And then all of a sudden, it came out this blows where he revealed who he was. He's like, according to my uncle, I don't even have a job. And then it kind of had this nice moment where Uncle Phil came back and is like, why didn't you tell me I would have been supporting you? And he really softens up towards the end of the last episode. We've talked about this before, where the whole family's moving and they're going their different directions. And Philip had been saying to all of his kids, like, I'm going to call you every Sunday. We're going to have our dad conversation on Sunday. And Will's like, I'm going to miss you guys. And it's like, I want you guys to think of me when you're thinking about your other kids. And Uncle Phil's like, just be by a phone on Sunday. And, it's just... And that's like a choked up moment as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... The little bit that I have seen, because I've not only seen the episode that we talked about, like the Why Doesn't My Dad Want Me, and then I saw the one that you suggested, but then I've seen clips as well. And, like, you do get to see a lot of Phil. And it's an undervalued part of being a father, of knowing how to set boundaries, but at the same time, like, having grace and mercy in that. And I think Phil, from what you're telling me, had to learn, like, he was good at that, setting boundaries, but then had to learn some of that grace and learn how to apologize when he did things the wrong way, or that he didn't meet Will on his level that needed to help him out and stuff like that. So I don't not believe you at all. All that I've seen, Uncle Phil, a lot of people, they talk about how great of a dad Uncle Phil is. And again, it just speaks one more time to the role that men can have in a young man's life, even if you're not their father directly or blood father, that, you know, being an uncle or a stepfather or adopted father, or just even in a kid's life, and just have a say in their life. Like, the fact that Will went from where he was at the beginning of the show and never really lost who he was, but gained a lot of understanding about life and a lot of the arc that he went through over all those seasons.
Yeah. And another great moment that fans will recognize. So Uncle Phil, he's a lawyer and then turns into a judge later on. And there's an episode that deals with racial profiling, where Will and Carlton were driving with permission Uncle Phil's white business partner's car, and they get arrested, and the cops don't believe them. They think they're just stealing the car. They get put in jail. And then Philip and Vivian go to the jail, and they're like, talking to the cops, who basically were completely corrupt, saying, did you contact these kids' parents or their lawyer? No, because I'm their parent. I'm their lawyer. And it's like, he hit this whole speech where it ends with, let these kids out, or I would have tie you up in so much litigation that your grandkids are going to need lawyers.
Nice.
And it's just like, he like brought it. I mean, I didn't even try to do an imitation, because I cannot be James Avery, but that's another one of those scenes to look up, and is like, even in that moment,
he went full Shredder there.
Yeah, pretty much. He didn't even say, that's my son and my nephew. He said, we're their parents.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, it's cool to see those TV moments of like the mom or dad like coming to their aid, because a lot of times when someone's in trouble, it's like, you know, once your dad shows up, then you're really in trouble, and that the consequences go from wherever you're at to home. Mm-hmm. But when that happened, it was like, no, you guys are in the wrong. My kids are right, and you had no business doing this. And so for them to, like, that's another way of how would we support our kids, is that you support them and you give them the benefit of the doubt, instead of, like, you know, I know my kids. I know that my kids, like, when something's happened, that there's two sides to a story or whatever, but my kids do have my benefit of the doubt. And so if they tell me something's going on, or if I have the common sense to recognize what actually is going on, I'm gonna speak to that. And so it's good to see the support of adults, because kids need to see that too, and they need to see it with their own eyes. My dad, my mom's gonna go to bat for me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. Those are the top 5 for each of us. I say these are really good picks. Is there anyone that, real quick before we close, anyone that you thought of that you wanted to throw out as an honorable mention?
Well, I don't know. I don't think Anakin Skywalker is the best dad.
No, I don't think so either. I think I like what they are doing with Obi-Wan, where, like, we'll talk about it next week, because we're gonna do an Obi-Wan Kenobi episode. No, not next week.
In a few weeks.
In a few weeks. We'll get there in July. We're going to do an Obi-Wan episode once Obi-Wan is done. And so we'll talk more about it. But I do like what they're doing with Obi-Wan. Again, talking about dads, he kind of is being forced almost into this dad role, as he, like, how do I watch over Luke? And then other stuff that happens in the show too. So it'll be really interesting to see him bounce back from being a failed dad with Darth Vader, and being another surrogate type dad for Luke.
Now that we mentioned it, you know, a dad we could have talked about is Owen from the Star Wars universe, because it's easy to say, oh, Owen, you're trying to box out Obi-Wan, but think about it from his perspective. Like, he sees his stepbrother, who he barely knew, like, turn evil real quick and become like supreme leader of the evil empire, and then that kid's mentor comes and says, well, can I train his son too? Like, no. Like,
there's a reason I hate Jedi. Yeah, I'm sure you do.
From his perspective, he's completely in his rights to say, like, no, we're just going to hang out here and be a normal family.
But we have too small of a sample size to put him in this list. But yeah, he does have a point. 100% he does have a point. So
yeah. So before we go to trivia, since it's a dad episode, I thought one of my favorite moments and quotes from my dad was when we were kids and we were going to a family reunion or something in Wisconsin, and my mom had said, no, you can't bring the Super Soakers. And then my dad puts them in the trunk of the car and says, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission.
Your dad's awesome.
Yeah.
My dad's awesome too. I don't have any that quotes that just jump off the page right away. He is full of Monty Python quotes. So, I mean, there you go. That's his quotes.
There you go.
All right, trivia. What was last week's trivia?
Last week we talked about This Is Us. I said, what was the only series regular in This Is Us where their character was only ever played by them? And that would be Chris Gere, who played Philip, who is Kate's second husband, because he was introduced too late in the game. We never did an episode all about Philip's backstory, so we only ever saw him as Philip, whereas every single other series regular, their character was played by at least two people.
Yep. So this week we have a different trivia, and it's Taj Mowry trivia. It's Taj Mowry time for trivia.
It is. You may know Taj Mowry as T.J. Henderson from Smart Guy. You may know him as Teddy from Full House. You may know him as Wade from Kim Possible. But do you know that he is going to be starring in an upcoming Disney Plus series?
I didn't know that.
Well, good, because that's the trivia question. What upcoming Disney Plus series is going to be starring a bunch of characters, including Taj Mowry?
Miss Marvel.
No.
Well, then I'm out. All right. Well, that will do it for this week's episode. Let us know what you think. What are some good TV dads? We talked about a lot of them. We talked about the ones that, in my opinion, really matter. But we might have missed a couple. You did bring up Danny Tanner, and we didn't put him on the list. You could even make the case for Jesse, too.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
And even Joey kind of fits into that, not technically a dad, but basically a dad. Kind of, all three of them did care about the kids, and we could dive into Full House more. I don't think we're gonna do a Full House episode anytime soon, but you never know.
Yeah. So I mean, let us know what are some that maybe we missed and didn't talk about. What are some, if you have one that's like Gomez, that's like we would have never thought of that, but he fits the bill really well. Let us know. We want to know that. But until next time, we'll be next week. We are, speaking of Miss Marvel, we are talking about a Marvel series. We're going to talk about Moon Knight. So if you were all about that Moon Knight action and you loved Oscar Isaac, then we are going to talk about that. If you weren't about that Moon Knight action, you know what the opposite of Moon Knight is? Sunday.
I was going to say, was that, yeah.
So we are talking about that next week, and we are joining again with Terrence from Movies on a Monday. So, and we're also going to have the other host from Movies on a Monday. So be on the lookout for that next week.
You do that joke every time.
Well, you know what? That's because it's a classic. You don't mess with the classics.
I still remember that one time you tried to say, I'm two Matts, and Terrence is like, no, done.
Well, that fit because I was for Loki. I'm gonna do it next time, and then because it's gonna fit for Moon Knight too, since he's got DID.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Matt. And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.